Welcome to the podcast of the Political Page blog with commentary from an attorney and entrepreneur on the political and social issues of the day, from a rationalist, libertarian, and often irreverent perspective. This is Political Page, and here's what's on my mind today. Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Political Page blog. This one is dated the 20th of July, 2019, and it's entitled, How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth to Have an Ungrateful Omar. Send her back, send her back, send her back. To read the hysteria in the mainstream press, one would think the Trump rally chant that was in South Carolina this week was a medieval mob chanting, "Burn the witch," and firing up the pyre for the latest hapless old woman with too many cats and chin hair. The entire brouhaha came up from a Trump tweet in which the president suggested that an unspecified fresh woman, fresh person, fresh entity. Help me here. I quake in terror of inadvertent triggers. Anyway, a freshman congresswoman might go back to her original country and fix the issues there, instead of incessantly criticizing the country that saved her butt. The crux, of course, was that he clearly meant to target the strident Somali immigrant congresswoman Ilhan Omar. And the problem with criticizing Ilhan Omar is that she is of a generally tannish coloration and wears a hijab. And as anyone in politically correct America knows, it is automatically racist to criticize anyone who is any shade tanner than an albino or any religion other than Christian. I mean, Christians are fair game, right? For anything that they do, ever. So never mind that Omar is one of the most repulsively strident, angry, ungrateful, ignorant, and generally offensive politicians to emerge from the American body politic in generations. Her asinine commentary veers from offensively anti-Semitic to overtly anti-American, and there's nothing else. Long before she was somehow, amazingly, you just can't get your mind around this, elected to the United States Congress, Omar cut her little baby teeth with such perspicacious insights as, how about explaining to a federal judge that convicted terrorists who supported the Islamic State terrorist network should receive light sentences because they only wanted to dismember and slaughter women and children as a, quote, consequence of systemic alienation. Translated, it's America's fault they want to kill us. She describes traditional American support for Israel, the only truly democratic, tolerant, even sane country in the Middle East, as being, quote, all about the Benjamins, baby. Inadvertently, or I don't think so, I think more likely intentionally, channeling the vicious Nazi rhetoric that Jewish money manipulates governments and economic policies. That same insidious rhetoric that ultimately led to the Holocaust. Think about that one for a minute. Do you think if a Republican politician, number one, excused terrorists, and two, parroted 1939 Nazi propagandic slogans, you think that the press would treat them as a hero of the downtrodden? Yeah, I don't know why, but I somehow doubt that, don't you? Now add to the fact that Omar fled this cesspit disaster, which is the Islamic hellhole of Somalia. It is a failed state. 50% of the rural population is so deprived that they have to practice open defecation in the streets. Clean water is basically unknown in the country. There are 80,000 cases of cholera and dysentery annually. 18,000 of them die from malnutrition each year. Over 2 million of their citizens live in refugee camps after being displaced not by war, but by their own freaking government. And as for women and girls like Ms. Omar was, Somalia offers the joy of being both denied even basic literacy training and the lovely expectation that 98% of them will be tied down and subjected to brutal genital mutilation in unsanitary bloodbaths by untrained, quote, surgeons with no anesthesia. And after being cut, that's the nice euphemism that they use for that. After being cut, the lucky 12-year-old girls are, quote, married to older men and disappear forever. Now, as an alternative to this Muslim land of milk and honey, Ms. Omar came to the United States, where she was accepted in, provided succor, she was provided a free education. Her family was able to prosper. Her father, rather ironically, worked for the U.S. Postal Service and hence supported his family from the largesse of the United States taxpayer. And ultimately, Omar would receive a university education way beyond basic literacy and be elected to one of the most powerful positions in the world, one of only 435 United States representatives in Congress. That is quite a different fate from being an illiterate, genitally mutilated 12-year-old sold to some rutting old goat to disappear forever, except when allowed to emerge and defecate in the street. But you know what? From the time of her arrival, Ms. Omar was dissatisfied with the life offered to her by America as an alternative to her homeland, and she isn't shy at all about telling us how we failed her. The first day we arrived in America, she explained, she learned that the orientation she was offered before her arrival, well, they were just false. She hadn't expected to see any homeless people. She thought prosperity was, quote, guaranteed. And despite her disappointment that immediately upon arrival she was not automatically offered a mansion with a staff of truckling toadies to butter her toast for her, she reluctantly became a citizen in 2000. And a quick year later, she reacted to the 9/11 attacks, not by flying the American flag or singing off-key versions of Proud to be an American like the rest of us rubes. No, her response was to suddenly learn to wear a hijab as what is, quote, an open declaration of her identity. Now, one doesn't truly need to know much more about Ms. Omar than that, does one? And yes, I'll give you this. Donald Trump was crude when he suggested that she might return to Somalia. If the United States has proven such a disappointment to her, yeah, it's crude to say that. And he assuredly overstepped when he used plurals in his tweet, which implicitly included the other members of her elegantly labeled squad of bitter malcontents, the remainder of whom were indeed born here, and they learned to dislike America from their cradles. They don't have anywhere to go back to. We are stuck with them. But when it came to Ms. Omar, he certainly had a point. There is nothing so offensive to everyday average Americans than having their generous country excoriated by a spoiled brat of an immigrant who actually achieved the American dream and lives a life of fame and comfort about which they, the ordinary deplorable rubes that we are, can only dream. It rankles us a lot. And you know what? It has absolutely nothing to do with her race or religion. It has to do with the fact that she's a nasty ingrate. And you know what? All the usual progressive ninnies in the press are moaning and emoting that Trump is insensitive and he has a lack of empathy and understanding, that not everyone has the same American experience, yada, 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 yada. But even PBS, in one of those ordinary American pulp pieces that routinely follow this type of kerfluffle, reluctantly recognize that these sentiments are kind of limited. They're limited to the social justice warriors, the reparations advocates, the genital beanied protesters who are, let's be honest, less likely to vote for Trump in 2020 than they are to sprout wings and fly to the moon. The deplorables, on the other hand, they appear to be right with him. Want to hear some of the comments from the deplorable side? The squad is ignorant and unappreciative. The rest of the deplorables seem to agree that if you don't like it, get out. There was a repeated refrain in that article that people are too quick to cry racism. There isn't anything racist about telling somebody who clearly dislikes America to go someplace else where they might like it better. Most thought it was actually a tempest in a teapot. People need to get over themselves. Seemed to sum it up quite neatly. And you know what? Republican approval jumped 5% on those comments, and the crowds loved it. Send her back. That pithy phrase does not just refer to the truculent Ms. Omar. That touches a chord with every quiet American battered to exhaustion by the arrested development cases on the left, screaming their primal anguish to the skies, peering for Russians under their maiden beds, decrying our imperialist American privilege and history, and carping ad nauseum about non-existent patriarchal threats to their uteri. They don't like it here. We wish they would go away someplace they like better and just stop the whining already. Send her back. Yeah, it certainly does have a ring to it, doesn't it? Thank you for tuning in to the Political Page podcast today. Original blog articles, complete with a lot more information and great links to original source material, can be found anytime on politicalpage.net. That's political, P-A-I-G-E, .net.